The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after noon, and Owen Patterson knew immediately it meant trouble because nothing good ever came fast across the Wyoming prairie in August of 1878. He reined in his black gelding and squinted against the sun, watching as the cloud grew closer and resolved itself into a single rider on a paint horse that looked ready to drop from exhaustion. Owen waited, one hand resting casual on his thigh but close enough to his Colt revolver that he could draw if needed. When the rider got close enough, he saw it was a woman, her dark hair coming loose from a bun and her dress covered in trail dust, and she was clutching something in her hand like her life depended on it. She pulled up hard when she saw him, and the paint horse wheezed and stumbled. Owen dismounted quick and grabbed the horse's bridle before the animal could fall and take the woman with it. She was breathing almost as hard as the horse, her face flushed from the heat and sun, and when she looked at him her eyes were desperate but determined. "I am lost," she said, and her voice had an accent he could not quite place, something Eastern and refined. She held up the paper in her hand, and he saw it was a map, hand-drawn and wrinkled from being folded and unfolded too many times. "But I am not giving up." Owen took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his forehead, studying her. She was maybe 20 years old, with dark eyes that sparked with intelligence, and a stubborn set to her jaw that told him she meant what she said about not giving up. Her dress had been fine once, probably bought in New York or Philadelphia, but now it was torn at the hem and stained with dust and something that looked like creek mud. "Where are you trying to get to, miss?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. He had 2 younger sisters back in Kansas, and he knew that tone helped when a woman was scared but too proud to show it. "Violet," she said. "Violet Prescott. I am looking for the Patterson Ranch. I have traveled from Boston, and I was told it was near Williams, but the man who gave me directions in town sent me the wrong way, I think, or I took a wrong turn, or perhaps the map is bad." She thrust the map toward him, and he saw her hands were shaking slightly. "Can you help me?" Owen felt like someone had kicked him in the chest. The Patterson Ranch was his ranch, the one his father had built before a heart attack took him last winter. Owen had been running it alone since then with just a couple of hired hands, and he was not expecting any visitors, certainly not a woman from Boston with a map. "I am Owen Patterson," he said slowly. "Why are you looking for my ranch?" Violet's eyes went wide, and then something like relief crossed her face, followed quickly by embarrassment and then determination again. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "I am your bride. We were arranged to be married. Did you not receive my letters?" Owen felt his jaw go slack. He had not received any letters about a bride, arranged or otherwise. His mother had died when he was 12, and his father had never remarried. He had no family left who would arrange such a thing, and he certainly had not done it himself. But looking at Violet Prescott, with her desperate eyes and her stubborn chin and her map clutched in her hand, he knew she believed what she was saying. "Miss Prescott," he said carefully, "I think there has been some kind of mistake. I did not arrange for a bride, and I have not received any letters." The color drained from her face, and for a moment he thought she might faint. She swayed in the saddle, and he reached up to steady her, his hand on her arm. Through the fabric of her dress he could feel how thin she was, like she had not eaten properly in days, maybe weeks. "That cannot be," she whispered. "The agency assured me. I paid them nearly everything I had. They said it was all arranged, that you were expecting me, that you needed a wife to help run the ranch." Her voice broke on the last word, and she pressed her free hand to her mouth. Owen felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and fierce. He knew the kind of agencies she was talking about, the ones that promised desperate women a new life out west and took their money, and sent them to addresses that sometimes existed and sometimes did not. Some of them were legitimate, run by honest people trying to help. Others were nothing but confident schemes designed to prey on folks who had no other options. He had heard stories about women who arrived to find no husband waiting, or worse, a husband who was nothing like what had been promised. "When did you last eat?" he asked, and she blinked at him in surprise. "I had some bread yesterday morning," she said. "I ran out of food 2 days ago. I have been trying to make the water last, but the creeks I found were mostly dry." Owen made a decision. Whatever the truth of this situation, whatever scheme or mistake had brought Violet Prescott to Wyoming, she needed help, and he was not the kind of man who could turn away someone in trouble. His father had raised him better than that. "All right," he said. "Here is what we are going to do. We are going to get your horse some water and rest, and we are going to get some food in you, and then we are going to figure out what happened. My ranch is about an hour's ride from here if we take it slow, which we need to do for your horse's sake. Can you make it that far?" Violet nodded, straightening in the saddle. "Yes, thank you, I can make it." He could see it cost her pride to accept help, and he respected that. He swung back up on his own horse and took the lead rope of the paint, leading them toward a creek he knew was nearby. The paint desperately needed water, and they all needed a moment to rest before making the ride to the ranch. The creek was not much more than a trickle this late in summer, but it was enough. Owen helped Violet down from her horse, and she stumbled when her feet hit the ground. He caught her elbow and steadied her, and she gave him a shaky smile. "Thank you," she said. "I am not usually so feeble. It has been a difficult journey." "How long have you been traveling?" he asked, leading the horses to the water. "I left Boston 6 weeks ago," she said. "The train took me as far as Cheyenne, and then I hired a wagon to bring me to Williams, but the driver left me there and said I would need to find my own way to the ranch. I bought this horse with the last of my money, and the man who sold it to me drew this map." She looked down at the paper in her hand, and her expression turned bitter. "I think perhaps he cheated me on both the horse and the directions." Owen examined the paint horse while it drank. The animal was older than he had first thought, maybe 15 years, and it had been ridden hard for too long without proper care. The saddle was worn and ill-fitting, and he could see where it had rubbed sores on the horse's back. He felt his anger toward the man who had sold Violet this horse grow hotter. "The horse will be all right with some rest and proper feed," he said. "But he should not have sold you an animal in this condition, especially not for what I am guessing he charged you." $40, Violet said quietly. "Is that too much?" It was nearly twice what the horse was worth, maybe more. Owen bit back a curse and nodded. "A bit high, yes." Violet sat down on a rock near the creek and put her face in her hands. For a moment he thought she was crying, but when she looked up her eyes were dry, just tired and angry. "I have been such a fool," she said. "I should have known better. My sister warned me, but I did not listen. I thought this was my chance to start over, to have a different life than the one I was trapped in. And now I have lost everything, and I am stranded in Wyoming with a stranger who never agreed to marry me. And I have no money to get home even if I wanted to, which I do not, because there is nothing for me back there anyway." The words tumbled out of her in a rush, and Owen could hear the exhaustion and desperation underneath them. He pulled out his canteen and offered it to her. "Drink some water," he said, "and then tell me the whole story from the beginning." Violet took the canteen and drank, and he could see her forcing herself to sip slowly instead of gulping it down. When she handed it back, she wiped her mouth and took a deep breath. "My father died 2 years ago," she said. "He was a clerk, and he did not leave much. My mother died when I was young. I have one sister, Alice, who married a shopkeeper. They offered to let me live with them, but Alice's husband made it clear I was not welcome, that I was a burden. I found work as a seamstress, but the pay was barely enough to cover my rent and food. I was getting desperate, and then I saw an advertisement for the Western Matrimonial Agency. They promised to match women with respectable men who needed wives, men who owned land and could provide a good home. I wrote to them, and they wrote back saying they had the perfect match, a rancher in Wyoming who had specifically requested a wife from the East, someone educated who could help with the business side of the ranch. They sent me a photograph. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph in a tin frame. Owen took it and felt his blood run cold. The photograph was of him, taken maybe 2 years ago when he had gone into Williams to have his picture made at his father's insistence. He had given copies to his father and to his sisters, and as far as he knew those were the only copies that existed. But here was Violet Prescott, holding a photograph of him that she had gotten from an agency in Boston. "Where did they get this?" he asked, his voice hard. "They said you sent it to them," Violet said, and he could hear the doubt creeping into her voice as she looked at his face. "They said you were eager to meet me, that you had read my letters and thought we would be well suited. They charged me a $50 fee to arrange everything, and they gave me the address of your ranch and this map, and told me to come to Williams, and then find my way from there. They said you would be expecting me by the end of August." Owen handed the photograph back and tried to control his temper. Some bastard had stolen his photograph and used it to con this woman out of her money and send her halfway across the country to a man who had no idea she was coming. It was cruel and calculated, and he wanted to find whoever was responsible and make them answer for it. "Miss Prescott," he said, "I promise you I had nothing to do with this agency, and I did not send them that photograph or ask for a bride. Someone has used my name and likeness without my knowledge or permission, and they have cheated you out of your money and endangered your life. I am sorry this happened to you." Violet nodded slowly, and he could see she was fighting not to cry. "So what do I do now?" she asked, and her voice was very small. Owen thought fast. The right thing to do would be to take her back to Williams, help her figure out how to get back to Boston or wherever she wanted to go. But she had just said there was nothing for her back east, and he believed her. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone who had already lost everything and had decided she would not lose any more. And there was something else, something he was hesitant to even think about. He was lonely. The ranch was big and empty, and since his father had died, he had been running it alone, working from dawn to dusk and falling into bed exhausted every night. He was 23 years old, and he had been so focused on keeping the ranch going that he had not thought about his own future, about whether he wanted a wife or family or anything beyond making sure the cattle were fed and the fences were mended. Looking at Violet Prescott, dusty and exhausted and stubborn, something shifted in his chest. She had traveled across the country with nothing but a map and a promise, and she had not given up even when everything had gone wrong. That took courage, the kind of courage he respected. "I have an idea," he said slowly, "but you do not have to agree to it if you do not want to. I want to make that clear right now. You do not owe me anything, and I will help you no matter what you decide." Violet looked at him with those dark, intelligent eyes. "What is your idea?" "The agency told you I needed help with the business side of the ranch, and that is actually true. I am good with cattle and horses, but I am terrible at keeping the books and writing the correspondence and dealing with the buyers. My father used to handle all that, and since he died I have been trying to do it myself, but I am falling behind. If you are educated, if you can read and write and do figures, then I could actually use your help. I could hire you on as my bookkeeper and housekeeper. I would pay you a fair wage, give you a room in the house, and provide your meals. You would earn enough to save up money, and if you decide you want to go back east or go somewhere else, you could do that. Or if you decide you like it here, you could stay. It would give you time to figure out what you want to do without being desperate and alone. Violet stared at him for a long moment. You would do that? She asked. Hire a complete stranger who showed up claiming to be your mail-order bride. You are not a stranger, Owen said. You are someone who got cheated and needs help, and I do need help with the ranch, that is the truth. This would not be charity, you would be working for your wages. What about propriety? Violet asked. A single man and a single woman living in the same house. People will talk. Owen shrugged. People out here have bigger things to worry about than gossip, mostly. And my hired hands, Jack and Tom, they bunk in the cabin about a quarter-mile from the main house. They can vouch that everything is proper. But if it makes you more comfortable, I can see if there is a family in Williams who would be willing to take you in as a boarder, and you could ride out to the ranch each day to work. Violet shook her head quickly. No, I think I would prefer to stay at the ranch if you are certain it would not cause trouble. I do not want to be in town where people would ask questions, and I do not want to waste time riding back and forth when I could be working. She paused and then added, I am a hard worker, Mr. Patterson. I know how to keep house and do books. I will earn my wages. I believe you, Owen said, and he meant it. Then it is settled. Let us get to the ranch and get you fed and rested, and we can start sorting everything out tomorrow. They rode slowly back to the ranch, and Owen found himself watching Violet from the corner of his eye. She sat straighter in the saddle now that she had water and a destination, and she looked around at the landscape with open curiosity instead of fear. When they crested the hill and the ranch came into view, she made a small sound of surprise. The Patterson Ranch was not the biggest spread in Wyoming, but it was well built and well maintained. The house was 2 stories, made of good timber with a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. There was a barn, a stable, a smokehouse, and the cabin where Jack and Tom stayed. Beyond that were the corrals and pastures, and in the distance, Owen could see some of the cattle grazing. It is beautiful, Violet said, and there was wonder in her voice. Owen felt a flush of pride. My father built most of it himself, he said. I have been trying to keep it up to his standards. They rode into the yard, and 2 men came out of the barn. Jack was older, maybe 50, with a gray beard and a weathered face. Tom was younger, perhaps 30, with red hair and a friendly grin. Both of them stopped and stared when they saw Violet. Jack, Tom, Owen said, dismounting and helping Violet down. This is Miss Violet Prescott. She's going to be working for us as our bookkeeper and housekeeper. Miss Prescott, this is Jack Turner and Tom Miller. They are my hired hands, and they are good men. Jack and Tom both touched their hats politely, and Owen could see the questions in their eyes, but they were smart enough not to ask in front of Violet. Pleased to meet you, miss, Jack said. Welcome to the Patterson Ranch. Tom, can you take care of Miss Prescott's horse? Owen asked. He needs water and feed and to have those saddle sores tended. Be gentle with him, he has had a hard few days. Sure thing, boss, Tom said, taking the paint's lead rope. Owen picked up Violet's small carpet bag from where it was tied to her saddle and gestured toward the house. Come on, let us get you inside and fed. The house was cooler than outside, and Owen was suddenly aware of how bachelor-sparse it looked. The furniture was solid but plain, and there were no curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floor, none of the touches his mother had added when she was alive. The kitchen was clean but utilitarian, and he realized Violet was probably used to much finer things back in Boston. "It is not fancy," he said, feeling awkward, "but it is sturdy and the roof does not leak." "It is wonderful," Violet said, and he thought she meant it. "Much better than the boarding house I was living in back east." Owen set her bag down and went to the kitchen. "I am going to make you some food," he said. "Nothing fancy, just beans and bacon and bread, but it will be hot and filling. While I do that, why do you not go upstairs and pick whichever bedroom you want? There are 3 up there. I use the one at the front of the house, so you can have either of the other 2. There should be clean sheets in the chest in the hallway, and there is a basin and pitcher in each room for washing up." Violet hesitated. "Should I not be the one cooking, if I am the housekeeper?" "Not today," Owen said firmly. "Today you are an exhausted traveler who needs food and rest. Tomorrow you can start earning your wages." She gave him a grateful look and headed upstairs. Owen heard her footsteps overhead as he got the fire going in the stove and started cooking. He made a large pot of beans with bacon, sliced some bread from the loaf he had baked that morning, and put coffee on to boil. By the time Violet came back downstairs, the food was ready. She had washed her face and hands and tried to tidy her hair, but she still looked exhausted. Owen dished up 2 large bowls of beans and set them on the table along with the bread and coffee. Violet sat down and looked at the food like she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat," Owen said. "As much as you want." She did not need to be told twice. She ate steadily and with focus, not rushing but not stopping until her bowl was empty. Owen refilled it without asking, and she ate that too, along with 3 slices of bread. Finally, she sat back with her coffee cup in her hands and let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said. "I cannot remember the last time I felt this full." Owen felt a pang of sympathy. "How bad was it in Boston?" he asked gently. Violet looked down at her coffee. "Bad enough that coming west to marry a stranger seemed like a good idea," she said. "I was not starving, but some days I had to choose between eating and keeping my room, and I always chose the room because I needed somewhere safe to sleep. I thought if I could just hold on long enough, save enough money, I could open my own seamstress shop, be my own employer. But the cost of everything kept going up, and I kept falling further behind. When I saw the agency advertisement, it felt like a miracle. A chance to start completely over, to have security and a home and maybe even a family someday." Her voice broke a little on the last word. "I feel so stupid." "You are not stupid," Owen said. "You are brave. Desperate maybe, but brave. It takes courage to risk everything on a chance at something better. The people who cheated you, they are the ones who should feel stupid, taking advantage of someone who was just trying to survive." Violet looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You are very kind, Mr. Patterson, kinder than I had any right to expect. I promise I will work hard and prove that hiring me was not a mistake." "I believe you," Owen said. "And you can call me Owen if you are comfortable with that. Mr. Patterson was my father." "Owen," Violet said, testing the name, "and you should call me Violet. If we are going to be working together, we should not be so formal." That night, after Violet had gone to bed in the room she had chosen, Owen sat on the porch and smoked his pipe and thought about the strange turn his life had taken. This morning he had been alone, just him and the ranch and the endless work that needed doing. Now there was a woman from Boston sleeping upstairs, a woman who had traveled across the country with nothing but hope and determination, a woman he had agreed to hire even though he knew nothing about her except that she had been cheated, and she refused to give up. Jack came over from the cabin and sat down on the porch steps. "Want to tell me what is really going on, boss?" he asked. "Because that story about hiring a bookkeeper does not quite add up, no offense." Owen sighed and told Jack the whole story about the matrimonial agency and the stolen photograph and Violet showing up expecting to find a husband who had never agreed to marry her. Jack listened without interrupting, and when Owen was done, he let out a low whistle. "That is low," Jack said. "Real low, cheating a woman like that. You did the right thing offering to help her. But boss, you realize people are going to assume she is your woman, right? Woman living in a bachelor's house, that is going to cause talk no matter what you say." "Let them talk," Owen said. "I am not going to throw her out just because of gossip. She has nowhere else to go and she needs help." Jack nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Owen. Your father would be proud. Just be careful, all right. I can see you already like this girl, and she is pretty and smart and in a vulnerable situation. That is a recipe for someone getting hurt if you are not careful about boundaries." Owen wanted to protest that he did not like Violet, not like that. They had just met. But he could not quite make himself say it, because Jack was right. There was something about Violet that drew him, something beyond just sympathy for her situation. The way she held her head up even when everything had gone wrong. The determination in her voice when she said she was not giving up. The intelligence in her eyes when she looked at him. He barely knew her, but he wanted to know more. "I will be careful," he promised Jack. "We are employer and employee, nothing more." Jack gave him a look that said he did not quite believe that, but he dropped the subject. "If you need anything, you know where to find me and Tom. We have got your back." "I know," Owen said. "Thank you." After Jack left, Owen sat on the porch a while longer, looking up at the stars and thinking about Violet asleep upstairs. He had told Jack they were just employer and employee, but he could not stop thinking about the way she had looked at him with those dark eyes, or the way his chest had tightened when she smiled her thanks. He was in dangerous territory, and he knew it. But he also knew he was not going to send her away. The next morning, Owen woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment he was confused because he always made his own breakfast, and then he remembered. Violet. He got dressed quickly and headed downstairs to find her in the kitchen, moving around with the confidence of someone who knew her way around a stove. She had on the same dress as yesterday, but she had cleaned it as best she could and pinned her hair up neatly. She looked tired still, but better than she had. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you do not mind me starting breakfast. I woke early and could not get back to sleep, so I thought I might as well be useful." "I do not mind at all," Owen said, sitting down at the table. "It is nice to have someone else cooking for a change. I am not terrible at it, but I am not great either." Violet served him a plate of bacon and eggs and fried bread, and it was good, better than anything he had made for himself in months. She sat down across from him with her own plate and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "I have been thinking," Violet said finally, "about the bookkeeping. Can I see the records today? I would like to understand how the ranch works, what the income and expenses are, so I know what I am dealing with." "Sure," Owen said. "They are in the study, which is really just a closet off the main room that my father used as an office. I have to warn you, they are a mess. I have been trying to keep up with everything, but I am not good at organizing paperwork." After breakfast, Owen showed Violet the study. It was small, just big enough for a desk and a chair and some shelves, and every surface was covered with papers. There were bills and receipts and letters from buyers and records of cattle sales, all mixed together in no particular order. Violet looked at the chaos and then looked at Owen, and he could see her trying not to laugh. "I warned you it was bad," he said, feeling embarrassed. "It is not bad," Violet said diplomatically. "It is just chaotic, but chaos can be organized. Do you have a ledger book?" Owen found a ledger book in one of the desk drawers and handed it to her. Violet sat down at the desk and began sorting through the papers, making neat piles and taking notes. Owen watched her for a few minutes, impressed by how quickly she worked, how she seemed to instinctively know what went together and what could be discarded. "I have work to do outside," he said. "Will you be all right in here?" Violet looked up and smiled at him, and Owen felt his heart do something strange in his chest. "I will be fine," she said. "This is exactly the kind of work I enjoy. I like bringing order to disorder." Owen left her to it and went out to join Jack and Tom in the work of running the ranch. They spent the morning mending fences in the north pasture, and Owen found his mind wandering back to Violet more than once. He wondered how she was doing with the books, whether she was finding the work satisfying or frustrating. He wondered if she was comfortable in the house, if she needed anything he had not thought to provide. He wondered what she was thinking about all this, whether she regretted coming west or was glad to be away from Boston, despite how it had all gone wrong. When they broke for the midday meal, Owen headed back to the house to find Violet had made a simple lunch of sandwiches and cold tea. The desk in the study was still covered with papers, but now they were in organized stacks, and she had already filled several pages of the ledger book with neat columns of numbers. "How is it going?" he asked, sitting down at the kitchen table. "It is going well," Violet said, joining him. "Your ranch is more profitable than I think you realize. You have been bringing in good money from cattle sales, but you have also been spending more than you need to on some supplies because you are not shopping around for better prices. And there are some buyers who have not paid their invoices. I found 3 from last year that are still outstanding. That is money you should have already collected." Owen stared at her. "I did not even know those invoices existed," he admitted. "I thought everyone had paid." "They probably thought you had forgotten about them," Violet said. "If you do not pursue payment, people will assume you do not need the money or do not care. I can write letters to them if you like, reminding them of what they owe and requesting payment within 30 days. "That would be helpful," Owen said, feeling a rush of relief. This was exactly what he had needed, someone who understood business and numbers in a way he never would. "I do not suppose you found any magic solutions to double my profits while you were at it," Violet smiled. "Not magic, but I do have some ideas. We can talk about them once I finish going through all the records and have a complete picture of your finances. But Owen, truly, the ranch is doing well. You have been working hard and it shows. You just need some help with the administrative side of things." Owen felt a warm glow at her words. His father had built this ranch from nothing, and since his death, Owen had been terrified he would fail to keep it going, that he would prove unworthy of his father's legacy. Hearing Violet say the ranch was doing well, that he had been working hard and it showed, made something tight in his chest loosen. "Thank you," he said, "for saying that, and for doing all this. I know it is just the first day, but you have already made a difference." Violet's cheeks flushed pink and she looked down at her sandwich. "I am glad to be useful," she said quietly. "It feels good to have purpose again." That afternoon, while Owen worked with Jack and Tom to move some of the cattle to a different pasture, he could not stop thinking about what Violet had said. It feels good to have purpose again. He realized that in Boston she must have felt adrift, working her seamstress job just to survive, with no real future to look forward to. Coming west, even under false pretenses, had given her hope for something more. And now here she was, making order out of his chaos, using her skills and intelligence in a way that mattered. He was glad he could give her that, glad he could help her feel like she had purpose. But it was more than that, if he was honest with himself. He liked having her in the house. He liked seeing her sitting at his father's desk, filling in the ledger with her neat handwriting. He liked the way she moved around the kitchen like she belonged there. He liked talking to her, listening to her ideas about the ranch business. He barely knew her. They had only met yesterday, but already he could not imagine the house without her. That evening, Violet made dinner, a stew with beef and vegetables that was the best thing Owen had tasted in months. She had even made biscuits, light and fluffy, the kind his mother used to make. After they ate, they sat on the porch together as the sun set, drinking coffee and talking about nothing in particular. Violet told him about Boston, about the boarding house where she had lived and the seamstress shop where she had worked. Owen told her about the ranch, about his father and his sisters and growing up in Wyoming. "You miss your sisters?" Violet asked. "Every day," Owen admitted. "They both married and moved away, one to Kansas and one to Colorado. I have not seen them since my father's funeral. We write letters, but it is not the same." "I understand," Violet said. "I miss my sister too, even though we did not part on good terms. I wish I had tried harder to make things work with her and her husband. Maybe if I had been less proud, less stubborn, I would not have ended up in such desperate circumstances. Or maybe you would have ended up miserable, living somewhere you were not wanted," Owen said. "Sometimes being stubborn is the same thing as being brave. Sometimes refusing to settle for less than you deserve is the right choice, even if it is hard." Violet looked at him in the fading light, and Owen could not read the expression on her face. "You have a kind way of looking at things," she said. "Most people would say I was foolish, that I should have been grateful for my sister's charity and not complained." "Most people have never been desperate," Owen said. "Most people do not know what it is like to have to choose between your pride and your survival." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Owen found himself acutely aware of how close Violet was sitting, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she had used to wash her hands. Close enough that if he reached out he could take her hand in his. He did not, because that would be crossing a line, but he wanted to. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Violet would wake early and make breakfast, and then while Owen worked with Jack and Tom on the ranch, she would work on the books and the correspondence. She wrote letters to the buyers who owed money, and to Owen's surprise, all three paid their outstanding invoices within 2 weeks. She reorganized the entire system for keeping records, creating a filing system that made sense, and keeping the ledger meticulously up to date. She went through all the bills and identified several places where Owen could save money by buying from different suppliers or negotiating better prices. But she did not stop at just bookkeeping. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing windows and sweeping floors and beating the dust out of the furniture. She made curtains for the windows out of fabric she found in a trunk in the attic, fabric that had belonged to Owen's mother. She planted a kitchen garden behind the house, coaxing vegetables out of the dry Wyoming soil with a determination that made Owen shake his head in admiration. She learned to bake bread the way Owen liked it, and she made meals that were simple but delicious, stretching the supplies to make them last longer without sacrificing quality. And slowly, day by day, Owen found himself falling in love with her. It was not a sudden thing, not a lightning strike of realization. It was gradual, like the sun rising slowly over the prairie. It was the way she laughed at his jokes, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. It was the way she asked him questions about the ranch and listened intently to his answers, genuinely interested in what he had to say. It was the way she sat on the porch with him in the evenings, talking, or sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out. It was the way she looked in the morning with her hair loose and her face soft with sleep, coming down the stairs to start breakfast. It was the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating on the ledger, and the way she hummed while she cooked, and the way she always asked Jack and Tom how they were doing when she saw them, treating them like people instead of just hired help. Owen knew he was in trouble. Violet was his employee, and she was living in his house, and she was in a vulnerable position. He had power over her in a way that made any romantic overture from him inherently problematic. She depended on him for her wages and her home, and he would not take advantage of that. He would not be the kind of man who pressured a woman who could not easily say no. But it was getting harder to keep his feelings hidden, especially when he caught her looking at him sometimes with an expression he could not quite read, something soft and wondering. And especially on the day she came out to the pasture where he was working to bring him water, and she tripped on a rock and he caught her. And for a moment, they were standing very close, her hands on his chest and his arms around her waist, and the air between them felt electric. They stared at each other, and Owen saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. Then she stepped back, flustered, and hurried back to the house, and Owen had to stand there for 10 minutes trying to get his breathing under control. That night, Jack pulled him aside after dinner. "You have got it bad, boss," he said, not unkindly. "Anyone with eyes can see it. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing," Owen said. "I am not going to do anything about it. She works for me, Jack. I am not going to pressure her into anything just because I developed feelings." "Have you considered that maybe she has feelings too?" Jack asked. "The way she looks at you when you are not looking back, it is pretty obvious she is not thinking of you as just her employer anymore." Owen felt hope surge in his chest, but he pushed it down. "Even if that is true, and I am not saying it is, she has only been here a month. She has nowhere else to go. How can I be sure any feelings she has are real and not just gratitude or dependence? How can I be sure I am not taking advantage of her situation?" "You could try asking her," Jack suggested. "You could try having an honest conversation about what you both want. And if I am wrong, if she does not feel the same way, then I have made things awkward and uncomfortable and she might feel like she has to leave, and where would she go?" "No, it is better to just keep things professional," Jack sighed. "You are overthinking this, Owen, but it is your life, your choice. Just do not wait so long that you miss your chance." But Owen did not know how to have that conversation without risking everything. So he kept his feelings to himself and tried to act normal, even though being around Violet was becoming a kind of sweet torture. Then one evening in early October, about 6 weeks after Violet had arrived, everything changed. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, as had become their habit, and Violet was quieter than usual. Owen noticed she kept glancing at him and then looking away, like she wanted to say something but could not figure out how to start. "Is everything all right?" he asked finally. "You seem like something is on your mind." Violet took a deep breath and turned to face him. "Owen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course," Owen said, feeling suddenly nervous. "What is it?" "Why did you really help me that day?" Violet asked. "Why did you offer me a job and a place to stay when you had no reason to trust me? You could have just pointed me back toward Williams and left me to figure things out on my own. Most men would have, but you did not. Why?" Owen thought carefully about how to answer. "Because you needed help," he said. "And because you reminded me that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is refuse to give up even when everything has gone wrong. I respected that. I still respect that." "Is that the only reason?" Violet asked, and there was something in her voice that made Owen's heart beat faster. He could lie. He could say yes, that was the only reason, and keep things safe and professional. But looking at Violet in the moonlight with her dark eyes fixed on his face, he found he could not lie to her. "No," he said quietly. "That is not the only reason. The truth is, Violet, from the moment I met you I felt something. I do not know what to call it. Connection, maybe. Recognition. Like I had been waiting for you without knowing it." And over these past weeks, getting to know you, watching you bring order to my chaos and make this house feel like a home again, those feelings have only gotten stronger. I am in love with you, Violet. I have been trying not to be, because you work for me and you are living in my house, and I did not want to take advantage of your situation. But you asked me to be honest, so there it is. I love you. Violet's eyes went wide, and for a long moment she just stared at him. Owen felt panic rising in his chest. He had made a mistake. He had ruined everything. She was going to leave, and it would be his fault. Then Violet reached out and took his hand, and the touch sent electricity through him. "I was so afraid you were just being kind," she said, and her voice was shaking slightly. "I was afraid that what I was feeling was one-sided, that I was imagining things that were not there. Owen, I have been in love with you since the day you helped me without asking for anything in return. Every day since then, I have fallen more in love with you. The way you treat everyone with respect and kindness, the way you work so hard to honor your father's legacy, the way you look at me like I matter, like I am more than just a burden or an obligation. I kept telling myself it was just gratitude, that I was confused, that I should not let myself hope for more, but I cannot help how I feel." Owen felt like his chest might explode with the joy flooding through him. "You love me?" he asked, needing to hear it again to believe it was real. "Yes," Violet said, and she was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much it terrifies me." Owen pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, burying her face against his chest. He held her tight, feeling the way she fit against him like she was made for this for him. "You do not need to be terrified," he murmured into her hair. "I am not going anywhere, and you do not need to go anywhere either unless you want to. This is your home now if you want it to be. Not as my employee, but as my partner, as my wife if you will have me." Violet pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes bright with tears and joy. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes," Owen said. "I know we have only known each other 6 weeks, and if you want more time, that is fine. But Violet, I do not need more time to know that you are the person I want to spend my life with. You are smart and brave and stubborn and kind, and you make me want to be better than I am. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Violet said, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you. I came west looking for a husband, and I found so much more than that. I found love. I found home. I found you." Owen kissed her then, soft and careful at first, giving her every chance to pull away if she wanted to. But Violet kissed him back with a fierceness that took his breath away, her arms wrapping around his neck and pulling him closer. It was everything Owen had imagined and more, kissing Violet under the stars on the porch of his father's house, knowing that she loved him, that she had chosen him just as he had chosen her. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against Violet's and smiled. "I feel like I should do this properly," he said. "Ask your father for permission or something." "My father is dead," Violet reminded him, "and I am old enough to make my own choices. I choose you, Owen Patterson. I choose this life." They stayed on the porch for hours, talking and kissing and planning their future. They decided to get married as soon as possible, not because they had to, but because neither of them saw any reason to wait. They talked about the ranch, about how Violet would continue to help with the business side while Owen handled the physical work. They talked about children, about how they both wanted a family someday, maybe 3 or 4 children who would grow up running free on the prairie. They talked about expanding the ranch, maybe buying more land, raising horses in addition to cattle. They talked about building onto the house, adding more rooms for those children they hoped to have. "I want to write to my sister," Violet said. "Tell her what happened, that I found someone who loves me and respects me. I think she will be happy for me once she gets over the shock. We can invite her and her husband to the wedding, Owen suggested, if you want them to come. Maybe not to the wedding, Violet said. That would be too expensive for them to travel, but I would like to write to her, try to mend that relationship. She is my only family. She is not your only family, Owen said. You have me now, and Jack and Tom, they are like family too, and my sisters, once they meet you, they will love you. You are part of the Patterson family now, Violet. Violet's eyes filled with tears again, and she kissed him. I never thought I would have this, she whispered. A family who wanted me, a place where I belonged, someone who loved me for who I am. It feels like a miracle. You made your own miracle, Owen said. You refused to give up. You kept going even when everything went wrong. That is why you are here, Violet. Not because of luck or fate or some agency scheme, because you had the courage to keep trying. They were married 3 weeks later in Williams, in the small church with Jack and Tom as witnesses, and a handful of townspeople who came out of curiosity, more than anything else. Violet wore a dress she made herself, pale blue with lace at the collar, and she looked so beautiful that Owen forgot how to breathe for a moment when he saw her walking down the aisle. They said their vows in front of the traveling preacher who passed through Williams once a month, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher said Owen could kiss his bride, Owen did, thoroughly, and the small congregation laughed and clapped. After the ceremony, they had a simple celebration at the ranch. Tom had shot a deer and Violet had roasted it, and they ate on the porch as the sun set, toasting their marriage with whiskey that Jack had been saving for a special occasion. It was not fancy, but it was perfect, surrounded by the land Owen loved and the people who had become their family. That night, Owen carried Violet over the threshold of their home, and they spent their wedding night discovering each other with a mix of nervousness and joy and love that made Owen feel like his heart might burst from his chest. Violet was beautiful and passionate and tender, and Owen told her he loved her about 100 times before they finally fell asleep, tangled together in the big bed that had been his father's and was now theirs. The next morning, Owen woke to find Violet already up, standing at the window in her nightgown and looking out at the ranch. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life is now than it was 3 months ago," Violet said. 3 months ago I was in Boston, working in that shop, sleeping in that tiny room, wondering if I would ever have anything more. And now I am here, married to a man I love, living in this beautiful place with a purpose and a future. It does not feel real sometimes. "It is real," Owen promised. "I am real and you are real, and this is our life now together." Violet turned in his arms and kissed him. "I am so glad I did not give up," she whispered. "I am so glad I kept trying even when everything seemed hopeless, because it led me to you." "I am glad too," Owen said. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Violet Patterson." She smiled at the name, her new name, and Owen felt that surge of joy and possessiveness and love that was becoming familiar. This was his wife, his partner, his Violet, and he was going to spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted choosing him. The first year of their marriage was hard work, but full of happiness. Violet continued to manage the books and the business side of the ranch, and her skill and careful management meant they had their most profitable year ever. She also proved to be good with horses, gentling them with patience and kindness, and she convinced Owen to start breeding horses in addition to the cattle. It was a good decision. There was high demand for good horses in Wyoming, and within 6 months they had sold 3 young horses for prices that made Owen shake his head in disbelief. But more than the financial success, what made that first year special was the partnership they built. They were a team, working together to make the ranch thrive. Owen valued Violet's opinions and ideas, and she respected his experience and knowledge of the land. They made decisions together, talked through problems together, celebrated successes together. It was the kind of marriage Owen's parents had had, the kind based on mutual respect and affection, and he was grateful for it every single day. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch together, and Owen would tell Violet stories about growing up on the ranch, and Violet would tell Owen about her childhood in Boston. They learned each other's histories, each other's fears and hopes and dreams. Violet told him about her father, who had been a quiet man who loved books, and how much she missed him. Owen told her about his mother, who had been fierce and strong, and who had taught him that women were every bit as capable as men. They talked about the injustices they had seen, about how hard life was for people like Violet who had no family wealth or connections, about how women were expected to accept whatever life gave them without complaint. "It is not fair," Violet said one night, "that a woman alone has so few options. If my father had left money, or if I had brothers instead of just a sister, my life would have been completely different. I would not have been desperate enough to respond to that agency advertisement. I would not have been cheated and abandoned. It makes me angry thinking about all the other women who are in the same situation I was in, who do not have someone like you to help them." "Maybe we can help," Owen said. "Not everyone, but some. If we hear about women in trouble, women who need work or a place to stay, maybe we can offer assistance. We have the room, and the ranch is doing well enough that we could afford to pay another worker if we needed one." Violet looked at him with so much love in her eyes that Owen felt his chest tighten. "You are a good man, Owen Patterson," she said. "The best man I have ever known." They did help when they could. Over the next few years, they employed 2 different women who were in difficult situations, giving them work and fair wages and helping them get on their feet. One of them eventually married Tom, to everyone's delight, and the other saved enough money to open a bakery in Williams. It was not much in the grand scheme of things, but it was something, and both Owen and Violet felt good about doing what they could. Violet wrote to her sister Alice, and to her joy, Alice wrote back. The letters were cautious at first, but gradually the relationship between the sisters began to heal. Alice apologized for how her husband had treated Violet, and Violet apologized for being too proud to accept help. They would never be as close as they had been when they were young. The distance and the years apart had changed them both too much, but they were sisters again, and that mattered. When Violet wrote to tell Alice she was pregnant with her first child, Alice sent back a beautiful blanket she had knitted, along with a letter full of congratulations and advice. Owen and Violet's first child was born in the spring of 1880, nearly 2 years after their marriage. It was a boy, healthy and loud, with Owen's dark hair and Violet's eyes. They named him James after Owen's father, and Owen cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed with love and gratitude and the weight of responsibility. Violet was exhausted but radiant, holding their son and smiling up at Owen with such joy that he felt like his heart might burst. "We made a person," she said, laughing a little through her own tears. "Owen, we made a whole person." "We did," Owen agreed, touching his son's tiny hand, marveling at the perfect little fingers. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." Being parents changed them, but in ways that felt right. Owen found himself working even harder, driven by the need to provide for his family and build something that would last, something he could pass on to James and any other children they might have. Violet amazed him with how naturally she took to motherhood, caring for James with a fierce protective love that reminded Owen of his own mother. But she did not stop being herself. She continued to manage the ranch books, just with James in a basket beside her, and she continued to have opinions and ideas about how to improve the business. Their second child, a daughter they named Charlotte, was born 2 years after James. And then, 3 years after Charlotte, twin boys they named Henry and Samuel. The house was full and loud and sometimes chaotic, and Owen loved every minute of it. He loved coming in from working on the ranch to find Violet in the kitchen with Charlotte helping her cook while the boys played on the floor. He loved the evenings when they would all sit together, Owen reading aloud from a book while Violet mended clothes and the children listened. He loved watching his children grow, seeing James develop Owen's love of horses and Charlotte inherit Violet's head for numbers, and the twins become inseparable partners in mischief. As the children grew, Violet made sure they all learned to read and write and do figures, and she was insistent that Charlotte receive the same education as her brothers. "I will not have my daughter grow up thinking she is less capable than her brothers," Violet said firmly. "She will have opportunities I did not have." Owen agreed completely. He had always respected women, thanks to his mother, and he wanted his daughter to grow up strong and confident, and aware that she could do anything her brothers could do. Charlotte was bright and curious, and she loved working with Violet on the ranch books, learning the business side of things. The boys loved working outside with Owen, learning to rope and ride and care for the animals. The twins, especially, seemed to have a gift for working with the horses, just like their mother. The years passed quickly, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their children's lives. James grew tall and serious, taking after Owen in temperament. Charlotte was clever and determined, taking after Violet. Henry and Samuel were wild and joyful, a combination of both their parents. The ranch continued to prosper, growing bigger as Owen bought more land and the horse breeding program became as successful as the cattle business. They built onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, and Violet made it beautiful with curtains and rugs and small touches that turned it into a home. Jack stayed on for years, becoming a beloved uncle figure to the children, before finally retiring to live with his sister in Cheyenne. Tom and his wife stayed, raising their own children alongside Owen and Violet's, and the families became close. They hired more help as the ranch grew, and Owen made sure to treat all his employees fairly, paying good wages and providing good housing, remembering how his father had taught him that you could measure a man by how he treated those who worked for him. Owen and Violet grew older together, their love deepening and maturing with the years. They still sat on the porch together in the evenings when they could, though now they were usually surrounded by children or grandchildren. Owen would look at Violet, at the silver in her dark hair and the lines around her eyes, and think she was more beautiful now than she had been at 20. She was his partner, his best friend, his love. She was the woman who had refused to give up, who had traveled across the country with nothing but hope and a map and sheer stubborn determination, and who had built a life with him that was better than anything he could have imagined. One evening, when they were both in their 60s and the children were all grown with families of their own, Violet and Owen sat on their porch watching the sun set over the prairie. James was running the ranch now, with Charlotte managing the business side, and Owen and Violet were content to let the younger generation take over while they enjoyed their grandchildren and each other. "You ever think about that day we met?" Violet asked, taking Owen's hand. "When I rode up with that terrible map, lost and exhausted and trying so hard not to cry. I think about it all the time," Owen said. "Best day of my life meeting you." "I was so scared," Violet admitted. "So desperate. I truly thought my life was over, that I had lost everything. I could not imagine how I would survive. And then there you were, this cowboy who stopped to help a stranger, who saw me at my lowest and decided I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Owen said. "I just gave you a chance. You did all the hard work. You refused to give up, just like you told me that first day. That is what made all the difference." Violet leaned her head on Owen's shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn pink and gold. "I am glad I kept that map," Violet said. "Even though it was wrong, even though it led me astray. Because getting lost was how I found my way home, how I found you." "I am glad too," Owen said, kissing the top of her head. "You are my home, Violet. You always will be." They sat together as the stars came out, the same stars they had sat under on their wedding night 40 years ago, and Owen felt deeply, profoundly grateful for the life they had built. Grateful for that moment when fate or luck or providence had brought Violet riding into his life with a map in her hand and determination in her heart. Grateful that she had not given up. Grateful that he had been there to help. Grateful for every day since, every moment of joy and struggle and love that had brought them to this place, this evening, this perfect contentment. The ranch that Owen's father had built and Owen had maintained, and Owen and Violet had grown together, would continue long after they were gone, passed on to their children and grandchildren, a legacy built on hard work and love. But more than the land or the cattle or the horses, what would endure was the story of the woman who had been lost but refused to give up, and the cowboy who had helped her find her way home. Their children would tell that story, and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the wrong path leads to exactly the right place, and that love can be found in the most unexpected moments. Owen and Violet lived out their remaining years surrounded by family and the land they loved, their bond as strong at the end as it had been at the beginning. When Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 70, Violet was beside him, holding his hand just as she had held it so many times over their long marriage. She followed him less than a year later, her heart unable to bear being apart from him for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast Wyoming sky they had both loved so much. On their shared headstone, James had carved both their names and dates, and below that a simple inscription. She was lost but did not give up. He helped her find home. Together they built a legacy of love. The ranch continued to thrive under James and his siblings, and Charlotte's grandchildren would eventually take it over, ensuring that the Patterson name and the work that Owen and Violet had done together would endure for generations. The house stood strong, sheltering new families, new love stories, new dreams. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, those who lived there would sit on the porch and tell the story of how it all began, of the cowboy who found a bride with a map in her hand, of the woman who said she was lost but not giving up, and of the love that grew between them and shaped everything that came after. It was a story of courage and second chances, of hope and determination, of finding love in unexpected places. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and harsh conditions, and the kind of people who refused to let hardship defeat them. But most of all, it was a love story, the kind that endures beyond a single lifetime, the kind that shapes families and futures and becomes part of the very land itself. And every time the story was told, whoever was listening would understand that sometimes getting lost is the beginning of finding what you were meant to find all along, and that refusing to give up is its own kind of map, leading you home even when the path seems impossible. Owen and Violet had proven that, had lived it, and their legacy was not just the ranch or the family they had built, but the truth that love and determination can transform everything, can turn loss into gain, despair into hope, loneliness into belonging. Their story was complete, every thread tied off, every question answered, every promise fulfilled. They had found each other against all odds, had chosen each other freely, had built a life together that honored them both. They had raised children who loved and respected them, who carried forward the values they had instilled. They had worked hard and loved deeply and lived fully, and at the end, they had left behind a legacy that would long outlast them. The prairie wind still blew across the Wyoming rangeland, carrying with it the ghosts of all the stories that had played out under that big sky. And among those stories, the story of Owen and Violet Patterson shone bright, a testament to what could happen when two people found each other at exactly the right moment, when courage met kindness and hope met opportunity, when love was allowed to grow and flourish and become something that would echo through the generations. Their journey had begun with a woman lost on the prairie, holding a map that pointed the wrong way, and it had ended with a family rooted deep in the land, with love that had stood the test of time, with a happily ever after that was earned and real and complete.